So here we go. So that's the kind of rough agenda for today. It is a lot to cover. So again, apologise, I'm not going to be able to get through all of it. I mean, we might do, so we'll see how we go. I wanted to kick off a bit about the history of Black History Month and where that originates from, because surprisingly, a lot of people still aren't kind of fully aware of it. And then I thought, because obviously we're in the fostering industry, I've been in this sector for well over a decade now, and through all from supervising social worker to registered manager at IFA, local authority and IFA, so I've got a good understanding. And again, it's something that's often missed out. So there's some piece of regulation I wanted to talk about. Then a bit about exploring ourselves, and there's a couple of models. People here might have come across already: the GRACES, social grace model, and the Loop model. And then obviously how we can support cross-cultural placements. There's a few kind of activities as well that are good, kind of direct work with children. It's good, something that even foster carers can do, social workers can do, just to help break the ice. And then the second sort of segment, it's more focused on US children. A lot of cross-cultural placements are involving US children, not all. The other disclaimer I will say, we kind of sometimes assume, and this is just statistically, it'd be like a white British fostering family and a child from a different background, but it can be vice versa as well. So, it's all interchangeable, this stuff, and it can be used in different combinations. So without further ado, I'll jump on to the history of Black History Month. And a lot of people still aren't aware of this. I thought it's important to give credit to these individuals that kind of brought us this month in the first place. Carter Woodson is the person who originally started this. He's a gentleman in the top picture. He originally, his parents were actually enslaved. They were slaves in America. Things then changed, and he went on to become the first person and only person to get a PhD from Harvard University, but any university PhD, whose parents were originally slaves. This gentleman, he's the one who started it. It was originally a week, and it was designed to celebrate the contributions American Black people throughout American history made. And he chose the second week of February originally because it was the birthdays of Frederick Douglass, who's the other gentleman, and also Abraham Lincoln, who were actually very influential in this movement as well. I haven't put Abraham Lincoln's picture up because we all know who Abraham Lincoln is, what he looks like, and I think he's on the currency as well. So, but I've got a Frederick Douglass because obviously a lot of people unfortunately still don't know about him. He was obviously a social reformer, abolitionist, orator, writer, statesman, and a very important figure in the African American civil rights movement. I could do a whole day-long presentation of just these two individuals, but obviously we haven't got that time. But if anyone does have time, do feel free to check them out on Google and some of their work. It is really impressive. Even to this day, it resonates. Then in 1976, things progressed a bit, and it became a whole month, Black History Month, as we kind of know it today. Now, I've kind of then skipped a bit. I've gone from 1976 to 2024. In fact, last week, 26th of September 2024. So again, I'm going to apologise, but there's a whole kind of chapter on that. Again, it's a day-long presentation. But obviously, unfortunately, don't have that time, so I've kind of skipped. And the reason I skipped to this is because, like literally last week, the Labour government have kind of released the report, Historical Roots of the Windrush Scandal. Previously, it was suppressed by the Conservative government. They wouldn't release it, so they did this report, looked at the deep-rooted racism, but they didn't want to publish it. Labour's manifesto was to obviously included all, kind of their desire was to kind of publish it, and it came out, and it was really kind of disturbing reading, to be honest. And it kind of outlined how between 1950 and 1981, all of the legislation around immigration or citizenship was designed to either fully or partly reduce the number of Black people allowed to live and work in the UK. Now, that is really, really sad and disheartening because, especially when you look at the Windrush generation, people were asked to come to the UK, help rebuild and be a part of this society and stuff. But then at the same time, the government and the establishment has been working to undermine that group and stop them later from coming and being established. And there's a lot of other injustices, racism that has been going on, and it still goes on. And some of this, it's important to understand because it kind of puts everything in the right context. Because to mark Black History Month, it's not just marking the good stuff, what's going well. It's really important to unpick the history, the roots, the injustices, and the fact that they still carry on. And it's also not just limited to people who identify as Black. So, for example, Unison, we do a Black member self-organised group. We have a definition chosen by our members. It's Black with capital B, and it actually covers other ethnic groups as well, like Asian, Arab, people who have basically suffered from colonialism in the past, and that detriment is still carrying on today in their daily lives. And also linked to the media, because funnily enough, this piece of image and reporting, I didn't see it at all in the UK media last week. I was actually on a Turkish news channel, and they actually reported on this, and that also kind of is very, very kind of big when you think about it. Here's some statistics. Again, I won't go through all of it, but in a nutshell, what the research shows is there's a growing mechanism of acceptance, or there are deep inequalities in children's social care. And it's quite disturbing, to be fair, when you think about it. Black children are more likely to be looked after. The number also going on to like adoption permanency is lower as well. So that means a lot more will either languish in foster care or other areas. And again, it's disproportionately high numbers, and that's really sad. The government does publish data on this regularly, so what I would suggest to everyone is do actually have a look at the data. It's also presented nicely. They'll have the data, and then they have a kind of summary, bullet points, key points, so you can just kind of get the key snippets from there. And they also do it in trends, so they'll have a time frame of a few years. This piece is also data, and I wanted to share this because it's again relevant to the work we do in our workspace. It's published by obviously the government. I actually got it from the Core and BAF website. Hopefully everyone here knows Core and BAF, so because they're the kind of bedrock for us. I'll quickly just interpret it. So in the total column, so there was a survey of all social workers in the UK. 81% of the social workers responded. Based on that 81%, 75.4% identified as white, and 14.10% identified as Black. Now, so that's of the social workforce of that 81%. Now, when we look at the senior management levels, you can see the quite worrying trend. So there's a disproportionately high number of social workers who identify as white, but only 4.8% who identify as Black. And this trend continues both in senior manager levels, middle manager, first line manager, and even senior prac level. So you can see again, only 12.6% of senior pracs are identified as Black, whereas of the workforce they're 14.10%. So they're underrepresented. And the white British percentage is overrepresented. There is a word for that. You can put it in the chat if you know what that word is, or a few words to describe that. So feel free to put it in the chat, and then we can kind of cover that off. Now, in the case holder level, it's different, and that's something a lot of staff, especially identified as Black, and BAME in general, shares that they often employed because they're needed. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. They'll be employed, but then they're not actually supported in progressing their careers equally or given equal opportunities. And there's a lot of factors behind that. So it's something to be mindful of. And it's not opinions. These are facts. The word that does come up, I don't think anyone's put it in the chat yet, but it's things like obviously white privilege. There's kind of discrimination, inequality, and sometimes even like stereotypes and things like that, and also sometimes a lack of understanding of how to support staff who don't identify as white British. So that's all. Again, it's on there. I would recommend people do actually kind of go and check this data out, because it's actually it's the ecosystem we work in. So to be able to do our work effectively, we kind of need to know the background. So I hope that's okay. That was, some people are aware of this, some aren't, and we're going to come to that a bit more, because the next step is in this kind of journey today. It kind of links to again the fostering regulation. So under the regulations 2011 schedule 3, in part 2 there's 2 key points, 12 and 13. So this relates to kind of the assessment of foster carers. So when we do the assessment, look at the religious persuasion and capacity to care for a child from any particular religious persuasion. And same when we look at the applicant's racial origin, cultural, linguistic background, and then their capacity to care for a child from any particular racial origin or cultural or linguistic background. And that's quite important. And sometimes it's almost forgotten, because obviously with the capacity, that's something we can influence and change as well when say we have foster carers with us. And that's why it's quite important to kind of ensure that there's appropriate training in that area as well. What I often find is there's a lack of training for foster carers in terms of cross-cultural placements or kind of structured development in those areas to increase that capacity. Again, without kind of like just stereotyping, but especially foster carers have been registered for a long time. Even because I kind of manage a team that do assessments, and sometimes we do other assessments like special guardianship, friends and family, and especially when we're assessing grandparents or even great grandparents, some of their views they might describe as old-fashioned, but the other word is even sometimes just quite racist. So it's quite important to kind of, for all of us, to have this duty to understand and challenge this, and also remind foster carers the importance of supporting children from all backgrounds. And also being proactive in learning, because no one's naturally born with this knowledge, so it's important to gain it. So that kind of brings me off, to this kind of next segment of this training. Before we kind of can do anything, we really need to understand who we are, what we know. So that's our own identity, our own culture, our own heritage, but then also our own personal biases, prejudices, knowledge gaps. Now, everyone has those, and the people who do this really well are the ones who actually kind of accept it. If you're in denial, you think you know it all, or no, we do a fantastic job in this area, we're covered, then that's usually rings alarm bells with people from like a BAME or global majority background. So it's really important to be sincere and to really kind of be humbled by this and kind of really take it on board. And same with me, I am obviously from a minority group myself. Even though I was born in the UK, I had a very different experience to a lot of other people. And a few months or so ago, I did a 2-day equality course from the union, and even I learned new things. So and it was quite humbling that there's still so much to learn. So it's really important that we kind of open ourselves up to this learning. And same with what I was saying today, it might resonate really well with some people, it might not. And so we'll kind of see how we get on with that area. do fire away with questions if you've got any, or even something you don't agree with. It's important to kind of talk through these things. The next one is a model which I've been a big fan of for a long time. Is kind of termed the social graces model. It's really useful because sometimes say we have a child in our care, and what is upsetting, so say it might be religion, Christian, and I see that in so many reports. I'm like, well, no one is just a Christian. There's different denominations within those different subgroups, different practices, different ways of celebrating events. Some events are celebrated, some aren't. Same with Islam, same with any major religion. And often people don't actually delve deeper. I once read a report and it said someone's from Latin America. was like, well, that's 21 different countries. Why didn't you just ask them which country specifically? So what this model does, it kind of gives us a bit of a framework to really explore things in a lot more detail. And it's also fantastic for us to do, for foster carers to do, other people, because it kind of really helps us kind of, really explore ourselves. So again, it links very closely to who it might be. There's also this matrix you can use because some aspects are visible, some aren't. In this kind of just setup, I haven't put any in the voiced section, but some of them are kind of voiced. Sometimes people kind of, go and talk about things a lot more, share. So, and sometimes it's different. So that religion, for example, is in here for this example, but for me, it's probably visible, unvoiced, or sometimes voiced. It might sit in the middle because, I'm Muslim. I've got the trademark kind of beard and stuff. So, but although when the hipster fashion came in, I was getting confused because I was giving the Islamic greeting to people, and they weren't all Muslim, so it kind of threw me off. But that's kind of part and parcel. The other model, so this is probably the more straightforward model I'd say, and it's one that can easily be used. The other one, I don't know if anyone's come across, is called the LUT model. And the purpose of it is to give us a bit of a lens to see things to, but also to appreciate that there's multiple layers to things and events that happen. So each kind of letter represents kind of a different facet of a story. So the L is lived. I won't read the side. You can feel free to read the commentary on the side. But live is what we've actually experienced before attaching any meaning to it. The untold is what is missing from our stories. The unknown. The untold is things that we choose not to say when we're kind of sharing a story. Unheard is where we've kind of shared it, but it's not been heard or received by the recipient. Untellable is also another you, but it's not on this diagram, but there is another you actually in this, and that's untellable. And that's stories we don't tell because either they're painful or because society prevents us from telling those stories because, the way it might be perceived or we may be judged on those. And that's quite a key one, and that's something that's kind of come more recently as this model has developed. The other one is obviously T is kind of like told. It's kind of like the what was told, and the telling is more like the how it was told. The reason it's really important is, storytelling is one of the oldest ways of communication in the world ever. And this is a communication model. It's something that a lot of people can relate to as well from different cultures, different backgrounds. It's something that we often do without kind of being conscious about it. I'm a practice educator as well, and I did a practice supervisor development program as well. And this is one of the models we cover as well, because even in supervision, one of the best ways of getting some kind of knowledge across is through telling a story of a lived experience, especially. And that usually resonates well. So if I ask somebody to do something, they might remember it, they might not, or give them some advice or something. But if I share a story about my own personal experience of it, they're more likely to remember it. And I haven't got time today, but I'm going to limit the stories I tell today. But if you ever come to one of my other training sessions, I do kind of literate with kind of stories of my own lived experience and what I've learned as through my journey as a social worker, and even before I became a social worker. And people have really found that useful, especially when they're newly qualified practitioners, or a lot younger than me and have had that kind of a little bit less lived experience. They kind of benefit from kind of having that insight. And again, it's something we can all use. Now, the next part of this training is kind of looking at some of the common grounds. Now, the best way, so we've kind of gone history, we've gone communication, now we're kind of looking at relationship side. Now, with any relationship, the best way to kind of really cement it, make it strong, is to actually look at commonality. Sports, whether you participate or watch, it's kind of like seen as a universal language. Football in particular is global. I've been to about 28 different countries around the world, and everyone plays football. I've seen it being played, on the streets, in stadiums. Um, sometimes balls literally just made out of rags and cloth wrapped around something. Um, and sometimes footballs that cost a lot of money, probably more than the clothes I'm wearing. So it's kind of, it kind of shows the kind of diversity and widespread nature of it. Football also is something that tries to be political, so they're trying to remain neutral wherever they can. Again, there's a bit of perspectives on that, because sometimes they ban some countries and sometimes they don't ban other countries, which you kind of think should be banned because of, similarity and equality. So it's one of those things, but it's a kind of a good way of kind of, like having a bit of a social interaction, asking whether it's children or carers what their favourite team is, why. I think pretty much everyone's got a football story to tell. So just, kind of linking back to it. I was at junior school once, and we finished football training, and we were told to take our boots off and then go inside. And I thought, I'll just take them off when I'm inside. But then I walked on the footpath, slipped, and had a cut on my head, and I've still got the scar from it. So that taught me a lesson, and that was just take them off before walking on concrete, because it was quite slippery. Because it had metal studs, you see, and it slipped. But it's one of those things that also it's a good way of letting off steam as well. So it's whether you kind of do it together or watch it. It does offer a lot of benefits, and that's also linked to mental well-being as well. The other common ground and is food. It's also what I'd share. It's also a common ground for disputes and arguments as well, especially in fostering households. Food, I view it as something very complicated and deep, and again very multifaceted. But it's not as simple as that. If we asked everyone here to go and make a margarita pizza, I guarantee everyone's will look differently, taste differently. Everyone will have a different recipe. There's so much diversity in that. So it's kind of like when we're getting to know people, it's a good way of kind of, again, breaking the ice, whether it's with colleagues, whether it's, with children we look after, or even with our own home. It's really, really useful. Food's also like a form of art. It's also therapeutic. I don't know if there's any, wannabe chefs here. But, in the evening, especially after, if I've got time, and it's normally on the weekends, I do like to try and cook something. I just find it a bit relaxing to switch off, and just be a bit creative. So that's a key one. The other one linked to that is dietary requirements. This is something which I tend to get frustrated about regularly, because they're often missed. And sometimes I'll do a case audit, and especially for you, there's one example. A child was collected from the police station. Social worker took him to McDonald's. He ate something there. I think it was a chicken or beef burger, and then the next day, or a few days later, he was asked, and he said, he's Muslim, has a halal diet. He's taken to McDonald's. I was like, McDonald's is halal. Why couldn't you just ask that on the first day? And again, and it's sadly a lot of people miss this, but they shouldn't, because same with this, there's obviously allergies and allergens and other things. It's really important that we kind of ask that, because in a society where a lot of people just eat anything, haven't got too many restrictions, it's hard to comprehend that there's other people who do have dietary restrictions, or the severity, because they're often people in the minority, especially in the UK. Whether it's someone with a peanut allergy, I think we've got at least one person known in our children's services who has that, so we can actually put protective measures in place. Natasha.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Razwan, in terms of McDonald's not being halal, then would it be are you suggesting that you wouldn't go take a child, a Muslim child, to McDonald's, or rather that what they would choose to eat in McDonald's, you'd have to be mindful of? Just to
Yeah,
expound upon that.
no, exactly. Yes, a lot of people are boycotting McDonald's at the moment, so it's a kind of it's a very complicated thing, really. Now, McDonald's, for example, I know like the fries they cook separately for a while as well. It's also the things like cooking oils as well, because sometimes they have animal fats in and some do and some don't. So, for example, I know Muslim people, some who will not go there at all. Some will go there and eat the fries. Some will go there and have a fillet of fish or a veggie deluxe. Um, and what I'm kind of trying to say is it's really important to find out that person's beliefs, but also what level they are, how they interpret it. One of the, like, for example, if you look at the halal section here, there's three symbols. One is generic, that's just Arabic for halal. You'll see that on a lot of shops, takeaways, restaurants, things like that. But then the other one, HMC and HFA, they're the kind of two key governing bodies in the UK. But they're very different on one thing. So HMC doesn't believe in stunning animals before slaughter, whereas HFA do allow for the stunning of animals before slaughter. And they're very kind of divided on that point. So traditionally, animal forms like chickens weren't stunned. It was a swift cut to the neck. But in the UK, often they are stunned, or they go through water with electricity because it then makes them floppy and easier to um, make them into food. However, the reality is, so what HMC would say is, well, actually, if I zapped you, you're going to feel it, the electricity, so the chicken still feels. So there's a huge debate, huge argument, and people sit on different fences. So some will be happy to eat the stunned food. Some will say, no, I'm going to stick with the traditional HMC. HMC's kind of approach is also very similar to kosher, and these are the different kosher boards. You'll see these symbols on a lot of like breads, even on Mars bars. I flipped one over just kind of the other day, and there's so much symbols on there. But the general thing is, it's everyone's personal choice. It's worth asking first. Don't assume anything. I've had cases where carers said, "Oh, the child refused to eat last night. I gave them a pizza, wrong." And I said, "Well, what was on the pizza?" She said, "Oh, pepperoni." I said, "Well, this was a child from a different background, didn't eat, meat and beef." I said, "Well, you didn't really then feed the child, did you? You can't say I gave something that they're not going to take and say it was tough." And it's also linked to the ingredients and also the cooking utensils. There's quite a food, as I say, it's a very big topic, and it's also one where things can go very wrong very quickly. I've seen a lot of placements break down over food or food-related things, so it's worth getting it right. Same with like religious symbols. A lot of people, either have these as a necklace or a tattoo, or you just see them on car stickers or things like that. So it's good to actually know what they mean as well. And again, it's a whole chapter on this, so I won't go into too much detail today for time. Linked to that is also like religious scriptures. Now, most of I think every religion has a form of a scripture in some form or another. Some or actually a lot of them actually revere them very highly. So like the Torah, for example, it's kind of, in fact, if there's an error with it, it's buried. You don't just rip it up and recycle it or throw it in the bin. Same with a lot of Islamic textures. If they're like out of date or torn or broken, there's a process of disposing of them, quite a strict process. Same with the Sikh and some of the Hindu religious scriptures as well. So it's kind of sometimes it's in contrast, because, like, for example, we can go, most hotels still these days have a Bible in them. People aren't as kind of respectful or where they put it, how they handle it, but a lot of the others do demand a lot of, sort of obliged to have respect. For example, to even touch a lot of them, I know, for example, with the Quran, you have to have a kind of certain state of purity first before you can even touch it. So it's kind of knowing these things. It's really important for people. So if you do, either support someone or in whichever sense, it's just being mindful to add the importance of them. once had a foster carer who had, it was an English version of crime, but she put it on the stairs. And her own son told her, I said, oh, no, in school they told us you're not allowed to do that. It needs to be put in a kind of a higher, respectful place, not on the steps. So that was some good learning there. Same with place of worship. I've been to a lot of different places of worship, and they're all fascinating. And it's something we don't often do, but a lot of them have open days. A lot of them are quite open, do community stuff now. And I do say to everyone, it's a good kind of opportunity to learn more, but also get out there and have different experiences. So wherever you live, if you even go on Google, you'll find a whole range of different places. I went to a synagogue a few months ago, and that was really kind of, the inside was very different to how I'd pictured it, and obviously in their particular sect it was one kind of approach. A lot of different religions, sects have a different approach to architecture as well. So well worth visiting. This one's a bit of a mind bogger, so I'm not going to go through it all, but the reason I put it up is more for the US children and for people who care for them. It's really important you really get under the bonnet, and as it were, and really look at where the child's background is, where they're from, and all the statistics and the differences. And when you look at the religions, there's so many different religions, and these are just the key top headers. If you drill down to different denominations, sects, it goes even more deeper. And I think what I sometimes find is a lot of people just make assumptions. So a lot of carers say, "Oh, Syria, oh, they must be Muslim." Well, actually, no. They're not really. They're all Muslims. There's a big Christian community. Druze as well. A lot of people don't know who Druze are, what they believe in. So I think the idea is for people to really take a meaningful look. Same with, South Sudan is the newest country in the world, but it's often confused with Sudan, and again, very different demographics. So I always say, people, don't assume, have a look. Same with Myanmar, that used to be called Burma, which was kind of like the colonial name. Again, huge range of different religions. I say majority Buddhism, but even then different sects groups. So the kind of the best approach is kind of really drill down and speak to the young person, see what it is that they believe in, how they practice and stuff. That then comes on to other things, which is like media, TV shows, movies. It's quite, it's a different, especially like some of the movie stars, they're known throughout the world. And they've got such a huge following around the world. I haven't put a picture. There's actually an Indian actor called Amitabh Bachchan, and there's a millennium poll by the BBC, and who the most famous, celebrity or person is. He topped it, and it was a BBC poll in England, and a lot of people didn't know who he was, but globally he came out top because he is just so well known, because he's been in the industry, I think, since the 60s, and he's still making movies now. He's a very versatile actor, so it's kind of common ground there, and it's a good way of kind of unpicking, especially with child from different culture, different background. It could also be, child was born and raised here, but they've got a different culture. They kind of have a different genre of movies they like. The only thing I would say be mindful is of stereotypes. There's a lot of kind of, whether it's media bias, negative stereotyping that goes in a lot of movies. It's something it's worth kind of just being mindful of. I think I was sharing with someone the other day. I was started watching a film on Netflix, and looking at the trailer, it was set in Midwest America, a small town. It stars Jessica Alba. You might have seen it. And it came up with a suggestion. But as soon as I started playing it, it was a kind of a scene of her being chased by some Arabic-speaking, baddies, and she's shooting back at them. And I was like, oh, come on, what's this going to do with anything? And it's just more stereotyping, negativity. So I think especially for children, sometimes it can be a bit more impactful. So if that, for example, if a person had a child who speaks Arabic in their home and they've put this film on, they could kind of be upset by that scene. So actually, we're not all like that. This isn't right, and it's a bit of sensationalism. Same with but sometimes other things like, people who have mental health kind of challenges and other things. So some films are very good at addressing those issues, some are very bad. So it's kind of worth kind of sometimes checking things out beforehand. The other one I'll say, comedies are a great thing to get into. It's kind of like, I'll put this up. This is without a doubt the funniest movie I've ever seen, and it's a French movie. And I watch it with subtitles. I know I can speak a bit of French, but it is hilarious. It has me in stitches every time. And the reason it's good comedy is because it also has that physical effect on you with the endorphins and other kind of happy chemicals that are released. And laughter, it's one of those, really great things that we sometimes underestimate. I won't spoil what this is about, but if anyone gets a chance to watch, find it, watch it. It has me in stitches, but then that's my perspective and my take on it. Somebody else might watch it and think, it might not be their cup of tea. Now, what it all comes down to, whether it's staff, whether it's people, and even for children, okay, the key thing is doing that research. And the thing is, it's so much easier these days with the Google, Bing, all these search engines. You can literally become an expert on pretty much anything you want to. YouTube also has a lot of good videos and tutorials. And you just can't beat that. I don't know if anyone remembers, but in the old days, we had to have a library card. You had to walk down to the library. You could only take out about 6 books at a time. You had to kind of go through the book to figure out what's actually in there. Whereas now you can just search. You can just search books online. It's so easy. So it's kind of just kind of making that time. And I said to you, it's always worth, whether it's a little bit of time once a week or here and there, or when you come across something, do look into it. I'm the type of person, if I read, I like to read a bit of the news in the evening, and if it's a term I didn't understand, I'll do a search and then just kind of sometimes even screenshot things because then I'll come back to it later. It's actually a very good habit to get into because it kind of really broadens your kind of lens massively. Now, one of the activities is a flags one, which I kind of like to do with people. There's another one actually. Is you can give people a blank piece of paper and say just draw you and your life, whatever you want to draw, and it's amazing what people draw. I often do that in skills to foster training or preparation training. So just to kind of see what people's view is of their life. But when we think about it, we can relate a lot of ourselves to certain flags. So, I like linguine pasta a lot, and that's Italian. So you could have the Italian flag. If there's any flags you don't know, just put it in the chat and I'll explain them. But some of them are self-explanatory, some aren't. Oh, okay. It's a big capital yes, please. Okay, just see that. So that's there. Oh, that's the chat. But the thing with all flags is a lot of them got a lot of history behind them. Flags also tell a story, and that again is something good to do with people. You can say, well, I relate to this. Say it's a Union Jack, and we all know the kind of story here. It tries to represent England, Scotland, and Wales as well. I think somehow there's no dragon on it, but it's probably one of the stripes. But they all kind of have that kind of story and connection. So it's something easy to do, whether it's your faith. I do like South Korean TV shows. I'm kind of into them and movies at the moment. So it's kind of worth doing this activity with people. Linked to this is just getting a map and saying where you've been. Now, for some people who haven't been abroad, that's fine. You can just get a map of the UK and just kind of pin where you've been. If it's a young child who hasn't been far at all, it's a good activity to say, well, where would you like to go? One of the things I used to like doing was use different colour pins. So one where I've been, one where I'd like to go. And then I'd say, well, if you really want to, that's a good activity you can do. Or you can talk about it, have a good call. Why do you want to go there? So there's kind of a lot to do with that, and it's a good visual and kind of physical kind of thing as well. Places also tell stories, and again, it links to that earlier importance of storytelling, learning about cultures, identity. You know, I didn't know until a few years ago, even in Cornwall, there's almost a different language, different dialect. You know, and it's things that we wouldn't always, you know about until we actually kind of make that effort, look into things. The next segment I'm going to quickly touch upon is cultural dress. And there's a term here called hypervisibility. The definitions, I won't read the definition, but it's in there. Now, in a nutshell, people, when they are different, often feel that they're under the microscope or they stand out too much. And they just want to blend in as normal. And I guarantee you, if somebody dressed like this walked into the office, they'd either get stares or comments, or they'll get compliments. Oh, that's a lovely bright colour. Oh, that's nice. But people either way usually don't want any of that. Just want to be able to walk in. You know, I can walk in like this, shirt tie. Somebody might compliment me on my tie, but I doubt it. They'll be to not look twice. But if I came in, you know, my cultural kind of garbs, which I actually prefer wearing because they're more comfortable, I'll get a lot of attention, and a lot of times that doesn't go down well. So some people love the attention, but especially when it comes to cultural aspects, people don't. It's also very easy to make a mistake. So, for example, the gentleman's in the white outfit, that's called a thobe. So if we said, "Oh, that's a nice dress," that person is very likely to get offended. So, you know, and same with you know, like the headgear they're wearing, it's all actually very different. So this red and white keffiyeh, that is kind of like more Jordanian style and design. So it's kind of important, you know, important to kind of really dig deep and learn what they mean. And same with the prints, a lot of them date back to like different cultures or parts of the country people are from. And so it's kind of giving that respect, but also, again, taking the lead from the person. Same with looked after children. I mean, the good thing is a lot of this stuff you can actually buy online nowadays. So it's kind of worth doing that, or there's shops in certain areas. Linked to that, the next, actually, there was going to be one other set I was coming in. It was linked to food. I forgot to mention. Now, in kind of like in the UK, a lot of the time we buy food online and have it delivered, or you know. But for a lot of children, there's a certain thing in going into a shop, touching, smelling food. I came across a care once, had a US child who wanted to do his own cooking. And I was like, yeah, well, you know, you can log in, pick what he wants online, and then we'll order it. It's like, well, that's not the same, because in a lot of countries that isn't the way to buy ingredients, food. You kind of go there, you kind of pick things up, smell them, squeeze them, see, you know, what the texture's like, and that was kind of a bit of learning for that person. But it's really important to be, you know, to kind of have, it's kind of like stop and think rather than just do the usual. Linked to that is also where we get our news from. So when I mentioned earlier about the Windrush scandal report, I didn't see in any of the UK media. I had to kind of, it was on a Turkish TRT World that I came across the article and an analysis of the story. So that was quite interesting. And they obviously covered it because there's a significant Turkish community in the UK. But it was disappointing that it didn't get the same coverage in other channels. I'm not saying these are all the best channels. These are just some I sometimes go to. Just I do also sometimes read the Daily Mail, things like that. And you know, some people call it Daily Malicious because it's not nice. But the reason I kind of browse on it sometimes, it gives me a different perspective. So the key message is, don't just go for one, but do look at the different perspective, the balance. Some things I won't read, like The Sun. That's my personal prejudice, bias, but I just haven't got the time to waste on that kind of level. But I will kind of, you know, look at the Independent, Guardian. Also, sometimes what a lot of people in the UK, a lot of people are doing that, but there's a lot of overseas channels. One of the best award-winning is Al Jazeera. they've done a huge amount of documentaries on kind of, especially US and people migrating from different countries. I was watching one about people migrating from Ecuador to Mexico, and I think it's called the Durian Gap. So there's a passage, it's called Durian Gap, very dangerous passage, and it kind of they followed a family of young children trying to go through the Durian Gap, and it was really, really eye-opening for me, the kind of struggles firsthand. And when I do the Caring for US course, I do ask people to kind of really watch that, to kind of see just how difficult it is. And that was just a small part of their long journey. Same with US children. We kind of sometimes see them here, but we don't appreciate how hard their journey's been. And especially we don't ever really do that as much. We normally jump in the car, take the train, bus, plane, but to cover thousands of miles without those is tricky. Linked to this is just a quick snapshot. It's about just saying that, look, activities and food are some of the key things, especially for US children. They also act as a good distraction and also help to build a bond and trust, because trust takes time to build, and you kind of can't just have it in one go. You really do need to kind of get out there. Again, linked to US as well, a lot of the time US children are really keen on education, job, and religion. They're some of the key factors. It's really important to kind of help them explore those and support them with those as well. This is another activity up the chart. Often show these images and ask people what they think. And it's really eye-opening, because people do think different things. If I just take the picture on the right, I've heard some really, seen some crazy interpretations. Some people think, it's a group of, young men, migrants coming to the country. One even said it was like somebody said, oh, it's really suspicious. They're fighting age men coming to the UK. It's very dangerous. And it's like, well, actually, a lot of it's to do with survival of the fittest. And unfortunately, such a long journey, very few actually make it. And that's why a lot of times you don't see a lot of children or even females on these boats, or elderly people, because it's such a physically demanding thing. But people's take on it is very different. And this is why it's quite good to sometimes do these activities. We put the pictures up. And kind of say that there's no right or wrong, but it's going to help you. And if you don't want to say it, just write down on a piece of paper what you think your version is. And then kind of, you can go around, if people want to talk, share, it's good. And you'll see all the different perspectives. Again, if you can zoom in, I've got a big screen, but again, all from different backgrounds, very clearly there. The wind, this is a very famous photo of the Windrush. Again, if you actually zoom in, it's a mixture of people, Caribbean backgrounds, some white people as well in there, and some Asians as well. So it's a mixture. But again, that's something people don't always realise. There's a very diverse population in the Caribbean area, very diverse. This is a map that shows something. Again, if you want to put it in the chat, you've got 10 seconds. What do you think this shows? Because this is something I always put up, and most people never get the right answer. So it's a map of something. What does the red area show? Come on, somebody type something in, and then I'll respond. It's also to test if everyone's awake, or if I've been a bit boring today. Yeah, that's it. Spot on, Natalie. That is a map of the British Empire. So I put that up because a lot of people just don't realise just how extensive it was, and at its height, this is how much of the world was controlled by Britain directly. Linked to that is obviously colonialism. A lot of this, even this month, everything has its roots. All kind of roads go back to colonialism. It's really important to understand that colonialism, it didn't just end with the empires, coming down. They still exist, and the legacy of it still carries on. There's 3 nations in the world that have never been colonized. If you know what any of those 3 are, feel free to put them in the chat. You've got a good 10 seconds. So the reason is, because it's not just Britain, but now the Dutch Empire, Belgium had one, Germany, Portugal, Spain, All these European countries had extensive empires globally. They weren't pleasant for a lot of people. And if you read history books on it from the UK and history books on some of the other countries, you'll get a very different perspective. In fact, like for example, a lot of people don't know, but India was the second richest country in the world until Britain arrived there. And when I was younger, I was told in school, it was really good. Britain went there, they built the railway, it's fantastic modernisation. But when you kind of read the analysis nowadays, you kind of, well, they built the railway to make it easier for them to steal the goods and the treasures from these countries and the crops and cotton and things like that. So it wasn't to help the population, it was to make it quicker and easier for the British Empire to kind of loot and plunder. So a lot of time people don't like to hear some of the harsh realities, but I think the only way to overcome it, and this is why this month's important, is to kind of have those difficult conversations. Still a lot of conversations going on about reparations and kind of redistribution of wealth, because as you can see, often the richer nations keep getting richer, the poorer struggle. It links to climate change as well. There's kind of caps on a lot of these countries, but they said, well, actually, we need to pollute to get ahead to your level. So if you want us to stop polluting, share the technology. So there's a lot going on. Again, Maria, well done. Japan is on the list. The other one is Korea. And the final one is Thailand. So these are countries that have never been fully colonized by a European nation. The other thing, again, I mentioned, it kind of affects the environment, economic instability, ethnic rivalries, human rights as well, and poverty. Sometimes, even if we looked after children coming to care in the UK, guarantee most of the time, poverty and economic factors play a part in as well. So if you ever look at that data and trend, you'll see a big trend in that area. And it's the same on a global scale here, where children, young people are suffering a lot more because of that. Now, the next few kind of slides focus more US, but it's kind of key. I'll just go along the keywords. One is obviously trauma and traumatic experiences. I think sometimes people underestimate because we do a lot on why children come to care because of neglect and abuse, these things, but we don't often do the same in-depth analysis of US children, a lot of them, why they come to care, the background they've come through to get here, the journeys. And there's a lot of challenges related to that, as well as separation from their family with little or no contact, new languages, religion, food. One of the good things I'd say is Google Translate. It's a really good app. If you haven't got it, download it. You can even download dictionary languages, so that's offline, but you can talk into it and it can talk back as well, and it can tell you, really helps with conversations. So that's something I'd say is really important. Also ask foster carers to usually familiarise themselves with a child in need framework, because a US child is automatically a child in need. So it's really important to kind of familiarise yourself with the framework and then kind of ask about that. The other thing I do say is it's also good to build a trust by making it clear we're not the police, we're not the Home Office, because sometimes people are very sceptical about opening up because they're worried it'll have a bigger impact in other areas. Resilience is really important. A lot of children generally are incredibly resilient, and I find a lot of US especially are even more resilient. And we'd really struggle. The water went off. It was a while ago here for a few hours, and I was struggling. The taps are dry. But imagine on a bigger scale. It's unbelievable sometimes. With resilience, there's a lot of other factors around that. So obviously loss of parent, primary caregiver, experience of neglect. And when I say poor parenting, it's not the parent isn't good, it's more that they're not in an opportunity to provide the best care. A lot of countries, people are struggling to feed their children. There's a lot of other hardships, restrictions out there. And in addition, there's a lot of exposure to violence on a completely different scale. If you talk to a child, from Syria, or especially at the moment from Iraq, Afghanistan, the level of violence they've seen is on a different scale. The same with children in obviously Palestine and Gaza. There's also difficulty in the mourning process as well when you kind of, loved ones passed away, and also difficulties in managing change. I won't go too much detail. The other thing I would say is they often say don't talk about politics or religion over dinner because it can lead to arguments. What I said in this area is actually learn about it. So fair enough, don't want to talk about, but learn about it, because people often say faux pas and accidentally say something and it's taken the wrong way. So do kind of learn about that. Community social networks are also really important. There's a lot of groups and organisations out there. It's really worth getting in touch with. I'm going to just Natasha, you can jump in.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Could we just jump to slide 33 just because of the time?
Yeah.
Thank you. So that's the welcoming one that you just had. Yeah, thank you. I think just as a way of framing everything that you've covered.
And we'll send the presentation out. There's a really good video at the end I liked to watch. It's well worth watching. We'll send the link for that as well. I think this is a key thing. Learn how to pronounce the child's name correctly. Find out about which country they're from, but also which region, town, village, as much as you can, and kind of research it beforehand. Same with religion, language, dietary requirements. When you have any cross-cultural placement, it's really important to know that, along with allergies and those things. A lot of time, we can have our personal prejudices come through, but you've got to look at things historically and widely and in the correct context. Same with if you've got other family members at home or other colleagues, and it's worth kind of sharing that information with, so everyone's kind of up to speed. I always recommend people kind of either cook or either ordering a special meal on the first to have a bit of a proper welcome, a bit of a celebration. It's really important. And also providing new clothing, toiletries, other things. Also, again, culturally appropriate shops organised. There's loads out there. You can also get a lot of stuff from Amazon these days, eBay, and I'm a bit addicted to it sometimes. I do get told off for using it a bit too much, but it's just a convenience. Appropriate books as well is quite important, because sometimes just it gives that familiarity, and again, you can get a whole range of overseas books as well these days from different areas, and it's kind of like just has that nostalgia. When I was at school, we said Roger Red Hat, Billy Blue Hat, and randomly I came across one recently. They've not been in print for decades, but it kind of stirred up those kind of nice feelings. So same with Postman Pat, he's still going. And I remember when I was at infant school, I had to have a book about him and Jess, his cat, and it kind of just seeing it again, it kind of invigorates those memories. So it's worth kind of focusing on those things. I know we're pretty much out of time. I don't know if there's any particular questions in there. So what I was going to say, one of the key messages I always say to people is, really, we're all one race. It's the human race. It's just our skin's a different pigment. Really, that's all it is. And I think it's that really important to understand that we're all the same, really, but we're also different because of our journeys, where we don't control where we were born, but that plays a big part in shaping our lives, who we are, what we do, and kind of how we see things. So that's why the earlier models are looking at how we see things, because the same thing could happen watched by 10 different people. They'll all have a different take on it, and it's really important to then understand everyone's take, and because it's multifaceted, multi-layered. So I'm happy to hang around if anyone's got any questions. If not, we could call it a day.
Thank you so much, Razwan. So just before we go over to questions, because I know some colleagues on the call will have to go, just a reminder that this whole month, every Tuesday, we are having different facilitators coming in to share with us different ways that we can support our children from the global majority. So the first 2 weeks really are setting the scene. This is really important for us to understand the context of Black history and the context of some of the challenges that are faced. Next week, we've got a panel joining us from the global majority from different perspectives. We've got care experienced adults who now work in fostering, who have had experience of that kind of intersectionality of race and being in care, and what impact that's had on them. We've also got some of our own practitioners from across the southeast as well. We've got a combination of foster carers who are experienced and talking about their experience, and so it's just really a safe space for us to ask some questions as well about things that we might want to know. I think the key thing is that this whole month needs to be a celebration of the global majority, but a safe space for us to learn and grow together. So please do come with your questions. And there is a booking link, but I will also, for everybody that is already getting our newsletter each month, you will automatically get an invitation that's been sent out. Then for the third and fourth week, it's much more kind of interactive or demonstrative. We've got skin and hair care, where someone's coming to actually show us products that can be used for skin and hair, talk to us through it. So by the end of that session, you might feel more confident in understanding the difference between 4C and 3A. So some of you on the call might know that already. It took me into my adulthood to realise that Afro hair has different curl patterns. And as someone that's got 3 children that have all got different hair patterns or curl patterns, that kind of information is really important. And then the session that we've got on cookery, we're hoping that it's going to be a fun and interactive one. And possibly you might even get an email encouraging you to go out and get some ingredients, because you might want to cook along during that session. But let's wait and see how adventurous some of us might be on that day. But I'm going to stop the recording now, just in case there are any questions, so you can feel free to ask them. And Razwan will stay on the line with us for a little while. Thank you very much for joining us, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And one thing I would say as well, there's a talking library which is really good, and if you can set one